"Listen," the older cop said, his tone both patronizing and benevolent, a toxic mix of contempt and false authority. "We can make this a lot simpler. A donation to the Port City Police Benevolent Fund, say $500, cash, and all this fuss will be gone. You'll be on your way." The sound of that voice echoed in the cold service corridor, a utilitarian space painted industrial gray and lit only by humming fluorescents. The smell of cleaning agents and stagnant air hung in the air. The dry click of stainless steel handcuffs rang out as the man in the elegant black suit shifted slightly, feeling the cold metal clasp his wrists behind his back. He said nothing. His silence was unusual. It was not the silence of fear or submission. It was heavy, deliberate. He looked straight into the eyes of the officer who had spoken, a deep, strangely calm gaze, as if he were not the victim in this situation, but a scientist examining an interesting specimen under a microscope. The gaze seemed to suck the air out of the hallway, making it thick and difficult to breathe. The younger officer, standing next to him, began to fidget. He licked his dry lips, avoiding the eyes of the handcuffed man. How did a seemingly successful businessman, fresh off a flight, end up handcuffed in a dark hallway and brazenly blackmailed? What exactly was this trouble they were talking about? And what was behind this man's eerie silence? A calmness that seemed more ominous than any threat. To find the answer, we have to rewind a few hours, to 35,000 feet above the American sky. In the first-class cabin of American Airlines Flight 772, Julian Hayes was focused on his tablet screen. The dense text of a complex legal brief on antitrust law was swiping across his face, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about the oak-paneled grand room in Washington, D.C., where in just a few days, he would lay his hand on a Bible and be sworn in as the 87th Attorney General of the United States. The responsibility was enormous. He would be the head of the Justice Department, responsible for enforcing the nation's laws, protecting the civil rights of all citizens, and ensuring that justice was administered fairly and impartially. The thought of it both filled him with pride and a huge burden. At 55, Julian has had an illustrious career. He graduated top of his class from Harvard Law School, worked as a federal prosecutor prosecuting high-profile corruption cases, and later became a respected defense attorney who fought for the underdog. He has a razor-sharp mind and an unwavering moral compass. The flight was a deliberate choice. He could have requested a government plane, but he refused. He wanted to spend these last moments as a private citizen. Julian Hayes, a son on his way to Port City to visit his 82-year-old mother. She was in a nursing home, her health failing. He wanted to sit by her bedside, hold her hand, and tell her everything, without the presence of Secret Service agents or aides. It was a personal trip, a return to his roots before he was swept up in the whirlwind of power and politics. He wore a Xenia suit, not to show off, but because it was customary. His mother had always taught him that dressing was a way to show respect for himself and others. He looked out the window at the white clouds drifting lazily below. He wondered if he was really ready for what was coming. Meanwhile, on the ground at Port City International Airport, Officer Frank Rizzo and Officer Mike Calloway were starting their shifts. Rizzo, with the droopy face and tired eyes of someone who had seen too much, was sipping bad coffee from a paper cup. "Just another day at the circus," he grumbled to Calloway. "Meager pay, and all the crazy people you have to deal with." Calloway, a tall young man with an innocent face, nodded obediently. He had been on the airport police force for only 2 years and still regarded Rizzo with a certain awe. Rizzo was a veteran, a man who knew the rules of the game. "Take it easy, Mike," Rizzo said, patting Calloway on the shoulder. "If you're smart, you can make more than your salary. You just have to know where to look." "Looking for what?" Calloway asked. Rizzo smirked. a disarming smile. "Look for opportunities." "Look." He nodded toward a well-dressed Asian man hauling a Louis Vuitton suitcase. "Looks like a fat sardine. Maybe he's carrying a wad of cash. Or maybe he's an illegal immigrant with fake papers. Or maybe he's just a tired businessman who doesn't want trouble. Either way, they have one thing in common. They're terrified of this uniform." Calloway swallowed. He knew what Rizzo was talking about. He had seen Rizzo do it several times: pick a target, make up a lame excuse to stop them, take them to a secluded area, and then suggest a way to resolve the problem quickly. It made him uncomfortable, but he dared not say anything. Rizzo had influence, and displeasing Rizzo meant getting the worst shifts and having no one to back him up when he needed it. So Calloway kept quiet, and that silence slowly became complicity. "What's the rule, Mike?" Rizzo asked, like a teacher testing a student. "Yeah, people who are alone," Calloway muttered. "People who don't look like they belong here. And never do it to a white man who looks powerful." "Exactly." Rizzo nodded, satisfied. "Those people will call a lawyer immediately. But the others, they'll pay to avoid the hassle. It's a business expense to travel. We're just helping them pay their bills." That pathological rationalization was how Rizzo lulled his conscience every day. He believed he was just taking what he deserved from a system that he felt had treated him unfairly, and his racial prejudice was a useful tool, helping him select victims he believed would be least likely to resist. When Flight 772 landed, Julian Hayes was one of the first people off the plane. He turned off his phone's airplane mode and immediately called his mother. "Mom, it's me. I just got off the plane. I'll be there in about an hour," he said, his voice soft, a stark contrast to the hard-nosed prosecutor he was. He walked as he spoke, his eyes searching for the sign that led to the baggage claim area. From a distance, Rizzo and Calloway spotted him. "Jackpot," Rizzo whispered, nudging Calloway. "Look at that suit. Those shoes. It looks like money walking. And he's walking alone." "Perfect." Calloway felt a tug in his stomach. This man looked nothing like his previous targets. He had a dignified bearing, a quiet confidence, but Calloway didn't dare argue. He nodded. Julian ended the call with his mother and put the phone back in his pocket. He was still a little disoriented, trying to figure out where he was in the vast airport. It was the moment of vulnerability Rizzo had been waiting for. "Now," Rizzo ordered. Calloway took a breath and started walking toward Julian. He pretended to look away, and then deliberately stumbled, bumping into Julian's shoulder. "Hey, watch where you're going!" Calloway snapped, his tone aggressive. Julian, taken aback, took a step back. He looked at the young policeman and said politely, "I'm sorry, officer. My bad." That's when Rizzo stepped in, playing the good guy. "What's going on here? Officer Calloway? Sir, is there a problem?" he asked Julian, his tone concerned but his eyes cold. "It's nothing," Julian replied calmly. "I just accidentally bumped into you, officer." Rizzo looked Julian up and down, an insulting appraisal. "You look a little flustered, a little nervous. Are you trying to avoid us?" Julian frowned. "Avoiding you guys? Why would I? I was making my way to baggage claim." "Your identification, please," Rizzo ordered, his voice losing its friendliness. Julian sighed quietly. He realized what was happening. This wasn't a random check. This was a staged act. With decades of experience in the legal system, he could smell abuse of power a mile away. He had two choices: reveal who he was and end the matter, or see where the show would go. His prosecutorial curiosity got the better of him. He wanted to see how the system he was about to inherit, actually worked at its lowest level. He quietly took out his wallet and handed Rizzo his driver's license. Rizzo looked at the license. "Julian Hayes. Sounds familiar." He handed it to Calloway. Check it out." While Calloway fiddled with his calculator, Rizzo continued the interrogation. "What do you do, Mr. Hayes?" "I am a lawyer," Julian replied simply. "A lawyer?" Rizzo sneered. "What kind of lawyer? The kind that helps criminals get away with their crimes?" Julian didn't answer. He just looked at him. Calloway turned back, looking slightly disappointed. "Clean record, frank, no warrants, no criminal record." This didn't faze Rizzo. He'd expected this. "It's okay. Sometimes the cleanest people are the dirtiest." He turned to Julian. "We've received a report of a man matching your description, suspected of transporting a large amount of unaccounted cash through this airport. For everyone's safety, we need you to come with us to a more private place to talk." "You have no good reason to keep me," Julian said, his voice still even but with a hint of steel. "Well, now we have," Rizzo said with a smirk. "You're being uncooperative. That's obstruction of law enforcement. Now come with us, or we'll handcuff you right here, in front of everyone. Your choice." Julian knew that arguing in public would only cause a scene. He nodded reluctantly. "All right." They led him away from the crowd, through a door marked employees only, and into a deserted service corridor. The door closed behind them, cutting off all sound of the outside world. The isolation was complete. "Okay, attorney," Rizzo said, folding his arms. "Open that briefcase." "I wouldn't do that without a search warrant," Julian declared. Rizzo's patience was wearing thin. He had expected a quick submission, but the man was stubborn. He decided it was time to increase the pressure. "So you're taking the hard way," Rizzo said. He gestured to Calloway. "Put him in handcuffs. Charges: suspicion of obstructing a law enforcement officer and failure to obey the lawful order of a police officer." Calloway hesitated for a second, but Rizzo's glare spurred him on. He took out the handcuffs and stepped behind Julian. Julian did not resist. He put his hands behind his back, and Calloway snapped the handcuffs shut. That's when Rizzo made the blackmail offer that started our story. After Rizzo finished speaking, Julian remained silent for an awkwardly long moment. He didn't look at Rizzo. Instead, he turned his head slightly, enough so that his eyes focused on Calloway, the younger officer. "Officer," Julian said, his voice surprisingly calm. "Your name is Calloway, isn't it? How old are you?" 28, 29. Calloway was startled by the direct question. 28, sir." 28, Julian repeated. "You have a whole career ahead of you, retirement, promotion, a job to be proud of. I advise you to think carefully about what you are getting yourself into right now. Some decisions are made in seconds, but the consequences last a lifetime." Those words, not a threat, but a sincere advice, seemed to hit Calloway. He looked at Rizzo in confusion. Rizzo laughed, an unpleasant sound echoing down the hall. "Oh, now you're threatening? Playing mind games with my boy? Look, my friend, my lawyer friend, you're not in a position to give advice. Now, I'll ask you one last time. It's either money or a night in county jail, a formal indictment, and your legal career in serious trouble. Take your pick." Julian sighed, a sigh of frustration rather than fear. "Okay," he said softly. "You leave me no choice." He raised his head. "By law, even a detainee has the right to make a phone call. I want to exercise that right now." Rizzo smirked. He thought Julian would finally give up and call a local lawyer. That amused him even more. "Okay, go ahead, but the clock is ticking. The price might go up." He took Julian's phone from his jacket pocket and held it out in front of him. "Give me the number. I'll dial it." Julian didn't look at the phone. He recited a 10-digit number from memory, one that no one could find in any phone book. Rizzo dialed the number and put it on speaker, wanting to hear the whole conversation. The line rang once before someone picked up. A deep, professional voice said, "Office open." Rizzo and Calloway looked at each other, slightly confused. This was not how a law office answered the phone. Julian spoke, his voice now carrying unmistakable authority. "This is the Eagle. I request immediate connection to the Director of Homeland Security, authentication code Sierra November Tango 70. Both policemen were stunned. Eagle? Director of Homeland Security? Authentication by code? These were spy movie terms, not something a normal lawyer would say. Calloway began to sweat, beads of sweat rolling down his temples. Rizzo still tried to look tough, but the smugness on his face was gone, replaced by confusion. The voice on the phone didn't hesitate. Identified, Eagle, hold. Less than 5 seconds later, another voice boomed over the loudspeaker. A voice with the authority and sharpness that millions of Americans would recognize from televised press conferences. Eagle, this is Falcon. How are you? Hawk, code name of the Secretary of Homeland Security. Rizzo felt like an iceberg had just fallen into his stomach. Julian replied, his voice still cold and precise. My situation is unsafe, sir. I am being held by 2 Port City Airport police officers, badge number 714, Officer Frank Rizzo, and badge number 882, Officer Mike Calloway. We are in a service lobby in Terminal B. They have just offered me a $500 bribe for my release. There was a deadly silence on the other end of the line for about 3 seconds. When the secretary spoke again, his voice had lost its calm and was replaced with a restrained rage. Understood. Mr. Hayes, hold your position. Say no more. Backup is on the way. ETA, 3 minutes. And then the line went dead. Hayes? Calloway was the first to speak, his voice shaking, almost a sob. He stared at the handcuffed man in utter horror. Julian Hayes, like the newly appointed Attorney General? The final piece of the puzzle fell into place. Julian Hayes, the name Rizzo had seen on his driver's license. Not the criminal, not the low-level lawyer. It was the name that had been on CNN and Fox News headlines this past week. The name of the man the president had chosen to lead the nation's entire law enforcement system. Rizzo stood rooted to the spot. The color drained from his face, leaving a pale, sweat-stained complexion. He looked at the handcuffs on Julian Hayes's wrists, then at his own hands. What the hell had he just done? He had handcuffed and attempted to blackmail the man who was about to become his boss's boss's boss. The man who had the authority to command the FBI, the DEA, and all the federal prosecutors. Panic set in. Oh my God, Rizzo stammered. He rushed toward Julian, his hands shaking as he searched for the handcuff keys. Sir, Mr. Attorney General, this is a terrible misunderstanding, a mistake. We were doing a training exercise. Calloway also fell to his knees, almost begging. Please, sir, we didn't know. We were just following procedure. Please, I have a family. Please don't ruin my life. Their pleas were pathetic and meaningless. Julian just stood there, silent, watching them struggle desperately with the handcuffs. The act was over, and now the curtain came down. Less than 3 minutes later, as promised, the hallway doors burst open. But it wasn't a SWAT team. It was a group of men and women in black suits, moving with the cold efficiency of federal agents. At the head of the group was an older man in a sheriff's uniform with 4 stars on his lapel. It was Port City Airport Police Chief David Chen. When Chen saw Julian Hayes, the man he had been told would be having a personal visit and needed to be discreetly monitored from a distance, standing with 2 of his officers kneeling at his feet trying to uncuff him. His face turned from red to white to blue. Mr. Hayes! Chen exclaimed, rushing forward. The FBI agents quickly took control, Fanning out and blocking the hallway, Rizzo finally got the handcuffs off. Julian rubbed his wrists, where they were red. He didn't look at Rizzo or Calloway. He looked straight at Chief Chen. The victim's composure was gone. His voice was now that of the Attorney General of the United States. "Chief Chen," Julian began, his voice cold and final, leaving no room for argument. "I want these two officers, Frank Rizzo, badge number 714, and Mike Calloway, badge number 882, stripped of their weapons, badges, and communications equipment immediately. They will be placed under arrest on the spot." Chen, face ashen, could only nod and gesture to his subordinates. Rizzo and Calloway stood there, dumbfounded, as their own colleagues stripped away the symbols of power they had so brutally abused. Julian then turned to the top FBI agent. "Agent Miller, I want this hallway treated as a crime scene. Obtain all audio and video recordings from Officer Rizzo and Officer Calloway's body cameras. I want their full service records, including all commendations, disciplinary actions, and citizen complaints filed against them throughout their careers. This case will be investigated by the Office of the U.S. Attorney under Chapter 18, Section 242 of the United States Code, deprivation of civil rights under color of law." He spoke clearly, reciting federal law from memory, each word a hammer blow to the fate of the two policemen. Finally, he looked straight at Rizzo and Calloway, who were shaking, tears in their eyes. "Let me be clear," Julian said, his voice dropping but his intensity rising. "This is not about me. I can call the Secretary of Homeland Security. I can call the Director of the FBI. This is about every other citizen who walks through this airport who can't make those calls, who you've harassed, threatened, and blackmailed in the dark. This is about the trust people have placed in the badge you wear, a trust you violated. That trust, for you two, ends here, right now." The downfall of Rizzo and Calloway was swift and thorough. They were fired from the police force within 24 hours. The incident became national news, a prime example of the abuse of power that the new administration of Julian Hayes vowed to combat. The FBI investigation uncovered a years-long pattern of corruption by Rizzo, with Calloway complicit over the past 2 years. They found dozens of similar cases, but previous victims were too afraid or lacked the resources to pursue the cases. The Office of the U.S. Attorney, under the supervision of the Department of Justice, indicted both on federal charges: conspiracy to deprive a person of civil rights, deprivation of civil rights under color of law, and conspiracy to commit racketeering. At trial, the evidence was overwhelming. Julian Hayes' riveting testimony, Calloway's body camera video, which he was too frightened to turn off, captured the entire conversation, including Rizzo's bribe offer, and Calloway's own confession, which he agreed to cooperate in exchange for a lighter sentence. The federal judge, a stern, older woman, looked straight at Rizzo as she pronounced the sentence. "Mr. Rizzo," she said, her voice echoing in the courtroom, "you have been given one of the highest honors in our society, the right to enforce the law and protect the people. You have turned that honor into a tool to satisfy your greed and prejudice. You have not only dishonored your badge, you have eroded public confidence in the very foundation of our justice system. That is an unforgivable betrayal." The verdict was in. Frank Rizzo was sentenced to 64 months, or 5 years and 4 months, in federal prison. Mike Calloway, for his cooperation, received a 36-month sentence. Both are without the possibility of parole. A few days later, Julian sat in the simple living room of his mother's nursing home. The smell of disinfectant and chamomile hung in the air. He was peeling an apple for her, the slices falling onto a plate. On a small TV in the corner, a news report was reporting the outcome of the trial. His mother, a small woman with still vivid eyes, placed her wrinkled hand on his. I'm proud of you. Julian, she said softly. You've always been a good boy. Julian smiled, a sad smile. He looked out the window at the changing leaves. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt only a weight of responsibility. Justice had been served, but it had been served too easily. It had been served because of who he was. The real fight, the fight he was about to wage, was for all those without names, without positions, whose voices were often silenced. That would be his true legacy. A badge is a badge of trust, not a license to prejudice and greed. Power, in the hands of the corrupt, becomes a weapon against the very people it is meant to protect. But the law, when enforced with integrity, is an impenetrable shield. Injustice may thrive in the dark, but it withers and dies in the bright light of accountability. The true measure of a society is not whether such people exist, but whether they are brought to justice. What do you think was going through Julian Hayes's mind while he was handcuffed and being blackmailed? Do you think the 5-year, 4-month prison sentence is fair, too harsh, or too lenient for Rizzo and Calloway's crimes? This story has a satisfying ending because of the victim's special status. How can we ensure justice for those who do not hold positions of power?